Welcome to Financially Speaking, brought to you by Buska Retirement Solutions and its affiliate firms. We offer retirement, tax, and legacy planning from a dedicated family-built team. In today's episode, we'll talk about how a strong relationship with your advisor can create long-term financial stability, even after you're gone. And what to do if you're retiring in a down market. And now for our weekly question and answer segment.
Welcome back to Financially Speaking. Today I'm here with Cole Bruner and Logan Waller of Buska Retirement Solutions and Buska Wealth Management. Let's talk about why it's valuable for your children to continue working with your financial advisor after you're gone. Now, children obviously are an important part of most people's lives, right?
Right.
They rarely listen to their parents.
True.
So, why is it important for my children to continue to work with my financial advisor after my passing?
Well, I think it kind of begins with they already are familiar with the assets. So, they kind of already know how to handle those types of things. And, we deal with that more often than we'd like to admit just because of the demographic that we work with. And so in terms of helping their family, obviously for a lot of these clients, we've been working with them for years and we've kind of built this plan over time and often, with the kids in mind. A lot of clients, especially as they get later into their, life, we start turning our attention to that legacy planning and how to most efficiently transfer those assets to the next generations. And so, kind of seeing that plan through with their existing financial professional can be really beneficial because again, they're already familiar with the accounts. They're going to know how to handle things after the client passes away. And it's just going to make for a little bit more of a seamless process potentially.
Sure. And do you find that the parents have talked with their children about their current assets and accounts and that, or are the children usually discovering that for the first time with you?
Well, it's more generational. So when you think back to like the silent generation moving into the baby boomers, they were a little bit more holding it to the chest, not having those conversations. But we found over time, as the generations get closer and closer to the millennials, Gen Zs and all that, those conversations are starting to happen more.
Good.
But we see all different types of ages coming in here.
Right.
So it's just pinpointing what type of generation they are, how they feel about it, and sometimes asking that. Yeah, have you had that conversation?
And we do encourage that too. Obviously we use our generational vault, which is, primarily designed to not only keep our clients on top of their accounts, but keep them organized, not only for their own benefit, but also if something happens to them, now their children have a direct place that they can log into. They can see all of their accounts, their important documents, their wills, their trusts, all of those types of things. And so we do encourage clients, share that information with them.
Sure.
Especially as we're getting into those older years, we've seen so many situations where clients pass away and their kids don't know anything. Mm-hmm. And so it's like a massive struggle to try to figure out where are all of the accounts. I've dealt with people that have literally had to go to every local bank because, their parents were opening CDs.
By the mailbox.
Yeah, exactly. And so, if you don't have these conversations, the unfortunate reality is things can be missed. And we see that often where, people didn't know about a life insurance policy or they didn't realize that there was a CD or even like a safety deposit box or something like that. I've heard clients that are like, I found a key, I'm not sure where it goes to,
Drive around to the banks.
Right, exactly. And so, having those intimate conversations, which, are granted difficult conversations to have. Nobody wants to talk about end of life planning or anything like that. And so, even though it is a difficult conversation to discuss with your family and your loved ones, it is an incredibly important one because you also want to make sure that your wishes are carried out and you want to communicate that to people.
Right. And I guess that's a good segue to my next question is, like I said, A, my kids don't listen to me. B, I might not want to talk to them anyway about end of life. Like it's a morbid discussion for me to have.
It is. Yeah.
How can you help me facilitate them speaking to you and getting involved in that process?
So I think it starts out with our continuous encouragement when we're meeting with them to not fall into what we all do, and it's like, let's have our own filing system. We get home, we put it on the counter, we're like, we'll file that later, and then 6 months go by and you have to blow the dust off of it. And
or
then
I hide
it
it from myself and I can't find it later.
Yes. Right. Or like keeping all those passwords, you have your password booklet. So it's really encouraging to keep those documents in one nice clean spot and letting the kids know that. But it also involves our services with estate planning.
Yeah.
Having that full scope, a one-stop shop, as cliche as that sounds, but having someone sit down and also explain that stuff too.
Yeah, and I mean, making sure that you have the important documents that you need. I mean, you have to make sure that your documents are not only complete, but also up to date. And we see so many people that come in for initial consultations and, we've got on our data form what documents they have, and I can't tell you how often they've got no circled on every single one, And it's like, well, I mean, granted, again, difficult thing to do, think about end of life and all of that, but it is a necessary component of a complete plan. And if you don't have that, obviously, working with a financial professional like our team and getting all of those documents in place is incredibly important, because then it's done, and then we can make sure that those stay updated with you as we move out into the future.
That makes sense. Now let's talk about done. I mean, obviously, explaining it to them is one thing. They maybe haven't as much experience with investing at that point because they're younger.
Yeah.
Can you help them actually with the functionally transferring the assets? Because understanding was one thing, but you got to get a hold of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you assist with something like that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do that all the time. If a client passes away and let's say they've got a traditional IRA, that traditional IRA is going to have to be transferred into the beneficiary's name in a beneficiary IRA, and then they're going to have a variety of options as to how they liquidate that account, because of course those rules have changed over the last few years. And so now they have to handle those differently than they have in the past. And so helping educate them on what they need to now do now that those assets are being transitioned into their name and what their options are, I think is incredibly important and a very, very important part of that process to make sure that they understand tax implications.
Right, yeah.
Because that could be huge.
Yeah, the IRA could trigger an issue for them.
Oh, for sure. I mean, if they don't realize the taxability of the asset and just, let's say, request a lump sum distribution, they might be a little surprised when they get that 1099 in the mail come February
After
or March.
the money has been spent?
Exactly. And we've seen that before, too. That can be a scary situation.
And that's where you get advice from your grandparents or your parents over time, and it's sometimes stale, outdated information because of changing laws
Or
and
just
things like
flat
that.
out wrong.
Or just flat out wrong, yeah. I read this on the internet type of thing, or I heard this from somebody. So it's making sure that they understand fully how it works.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What benefits does that continuity have for the child? So to stay with you guys after the planning has been done, what benefits does that continuity carry through for them?
Well, I think that in terms of the continuity of the plan, again, like we had mentioned before, in most cases, we've set that plan up with that client and worked with them for years to tweak it and adjust it and make sure that it was most efficient for them and their heirs and all of those types of things. So I think just having that baseline understanding of what their parents' goals were for those assets, and then again, helping them to understand how that relates to their financial situation. And sometimes we find clients that are inheriting assets don't have a relationship with an existing financial professional. And if that's the case, then certainly they want someone to be guiding them through that process, because like I said before, there's a lot of potential mistakes that could be made.
Right, and you could go from having not much to having something in a pretty short circumstance.
Absolutely.
Good. Well, I tell you what, after a short break, we'll explore how long-term advisory relationships can help families preserve wealth, reduce stress during major life transitions, and keep financial plans moving forward across generations. Stay with us.
Do you have a plan for how your assets will be handled after you're gone? Without one, the state could end up making life's most important decisions for your family. Through our partnership with Estate Guru, we make a estate planning process simple and affordable, offering wills, powers of attorney, and revocable trusts. On average, our service costs 70% less than the traditional estate attorney fees, and you may even qualify for free financial and healthcare power of attorneys. Call our office today to get started.
And now back to our weekly question and answer segment.
During today's show, we've been diving into how a strong relationship with your trusted financial advisor can create long-term financial stability even after you're gone. And before the break, Cole and Logan talked about how your advisor can help your children manage the transition to inherited wealth. And let's consider that a little further. What challenges or potential problems can an adult child face when they come across a sudden inheritance?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is they're going through all the grief and the emotions after they lose a loved one, so making some mistakes or irrational decisions. You get this lump sum of money, And then starts to go through the brain, I've always wanted this, I wanted that.
Right.
And instead of thinking about, okay, is there a state, plan expenses or last expenses, and really what the parents wanted done with that inheritance.
Yeah, and I mean, we always say that emotional decision making is never a good idea. I mean, in terms of your own financial plan, inheritance, whatever it might be, and so working with a financial professional can help to not necessarily, cut out the emotion, but, when it comes to the financial decision making, set the emotions aside and help make decisions based on facts and details about your long-term plans, and also looking at how that inheritance will impact your overall financial life.
Right.
Because, I mean, sometimes it's, let's use some of this to pay off debt, or sometimes it's let's set this away and then use it for a long-term contribution strategy for your own retirement accounts, and all of these different things. They're all things that should be considered. And obviously, a grieving person might not necessarily immediately think about all of those things.
Sure.
Like Logan said, they kind of tend to go for the instant, let's get our hands on the money and then deal with the rest later. Yeah. And sometimes that can cost unnecessary taxation and different things like that. So I think really working with a financial professional is going to help to focus on what's going to make the most sense for you from a tax perspective, from a long-term planning perspective, debt elimination, all of those different things can be considered. And again, you might not necessarily be thinking about that in the heat of the moment.
Sure. And well, some of those things are a little more boring than buying a new boat or something. Too,
well,
right?
This is true, unfortunately.
Which is where you come in.
Sometimes we have to be the voice of reason, right?
I hate those. How can a financial advisor maintain the original intent behind the estate or legacy? I mean, obviously, who I'm leaving money to and I'm leaving money to somebody, that's a transactional deal.
Right.
But oftentimes people have bigger wishes for the money or something. How do you help manage that? And what types of wishes do you see?
Well, I mean, it kind of depends on the client circumstances and the size of the estate and all of those types of things, and also what type of estate planning documents the client had in place. I mean, if they had a trust, the trust might have specific provisions for payouts to individuals, charities, all of those types of things. And there's other types of assets involved too, in terms of like how life insurance is supposed to be handled in the event of a client's passing versus, the idea of what they were thinking for their IRAs and different things along those lines. And when we're working with our clients, we're really trying to create that strategy with them to fully understand what those wishes are. Because especially if they haven't had that difficult conversation, which like we said before, a lot of people haven't,
right,
we can help communicate those things to the beneficiaries to help understand this was the intent of these assets. Now, granted, we're not going to be able to force them to carry them out,
right,
unless there's some sort of, like I said, a trust
document
or something.
Or
yes,
legal,
exactly.
Yeah.
Something that lays it out specifically for them. But ultimately, we can help communicate those wishes to them and help them to understand what their parents originally intended. And then from there, we can work with them to create the strategy around their own financial situation.
Makes sense. So there's a big difference between my hopes and dreams and wishes for the money versus my legal strategy for this is going to happen.
Yeah, and also thinking about if there's multiple beneficiaries or kids that are getting it, and we can help prevent having them battle over it, because we've heard stories time and time again where there's fighting over money, or one person, one of the kids thinks they deserve more than the other. Mm-hmm. So it's really just being that third party to like, hey, this is what they wanted, these are the wishes, keep that family together type.
Now that you mentioned that, I know several personal people who have gone through something like that and has caused family strife for
big deal
years.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Absolutely.
What you would consider to be a little thing, but cause issues.
I mean, we've seen tight-knit families torn apart, families sue each other, all that kind of stuff, and it's potentially avoidable, because a lot of times this is happening because of uncertainty, because the person that passed away didn't have things clearly documented and didn't outline all of those things to their loved ones. And so not spelling it out for them can create potential chaos after you're gone. And of course, now you're not here to try to mitigate it and bring people back together and help them to understand what the goals were. So it is incredibly important to not only have that well documented, but also also to communicate that, because
Right.
then you avoid some of those uncomfortable situations after the fact, or as much as possible anyways, because you'll always have those strange situations
Sure,
that
they
pop
disagreed
up.
or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that the documentation component is incredibly important, because if your wishes aren't documented, somebody else is making those decisions for you, and that's where things can potentially go awry.
Makes sense. The communication obviously is like a huge part, like you said.
Yeah.
What role can you guys play in keeping the family's financial goals aligned across that? I mean, how can you help with the communication? Because like we talked about before, it's uncomfortable to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it all starts with having those challenging questions when we're sitting down with those clients, and probing questions to get them to think about things maybe they never thought of before.
Yeah.
So instead of just going through the normal rigmarole, it's like, have you thought about this? What about this? Especially when it comes to real estate and property.
Oh, yeah.
We have a lot of farmers in our area and things
Yeah.
like that, and land. So it's how do we break up those assets? It's not just the investable assets.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
One child has the farm. You can't necessarily sell half of it or a combine or something, and
Yep.
there you go.
Yeah, we see that often too.
How does ongoing guidance help reduce those costly mistakes during times of grief or change? Like how can you, is it a one-time event or does it carry on for a while?
Well, I think in most cases, it's now being integrated into that person's own financial plan. And so obviously having that ongoing relationship with an advisor is really going to help to provide that ongoing support and really provide a guidance level that's going to provide them confidence that they're still doing the right things as we move out into the future. We want to make sure that they're taking advantage of all of the opportunities they can and do so within a way that makes the most sense for their overall financial plan.
And certainly we'll wrap up here with the end of it, but you guys, I'd like to thank you guys for having those discussions. There's not a lot of people that the kids don't want to do it, parents don't want to do it. Who else is going to do it? So
Yeah.
brave of you guys to step up and do that.
Well, somebody's got to do it.
Comfortable as
they
it may
say,
be.
right? Right.
Got to do the right thing.
Great. Thank you again for joining me today.
Of course.
Thank you. We'll be back with more Financially Speaking right after this.
At Buska, our goal is to streamline the retirement planning process to help you move towards a successful retirement with confidence and ease. Through our 3 companies, we create personalized comprehensive retirement plans by integrating investment management, income planning, tax strategies, estate planning, as well as health insurance and Medicare planning, all under one roof. Call today or visit retirewithbuska.com to schedule your complimentary, no-obligation consultation or to get a second opinion review of your current plan. Let's make retirement planning easier together.
And now, our Financially Speaking weekly desk segment.
Welcome back to Financially Speaking. I'm Sue Buska from Buska Retirement Solutions, and joining me today is Ryan Packa. Now today, Ryan and I are going to talk about what to do if you're retiring in a down market.
That's right. Investopedia article titled Worried About Retiring in a Market Slump? Here's what experts suggest you do now has some useful answers.
Well, let's jump right in. What's the first thing Investopedia does recommend?
Sure, Investopedia says try not to panic sell because you might regret it.
And that can be tough for some people psychologically because a stock with sinking value can make investors feel like they're on the Titanic. And selling can seem like the lifeboat that prevents your portfolio from dropping even lower. So why should people avoid giving into that mindset?
Well, first of all, it's short-sighted. We know down markets are down and they come back up. So you may be selling off a stock based on recent losses and end up missing out on gains when the same stock comes back up.
And pulling out of the market and getting back in at the right time is tricky.
Yeah, people who do that oftentimes fail.
Well, the article uses this hypothetical example. If an investor invested $10,000 in the S&P 500 in 1995 and stayed in the market until 2024, their investment would have grown significantly. However, if they missed the 10 best days of the market during those 30 years, they would have made $121,500 less than if they had stayed invested all that time.
Yeah, so in other words, missing just the top 10 days of the market over 30 years can really hurt your returns. The key idea is that some of the best market days can contribute to a big portion of your overall gains.
And right on the money there, Ryan.
That seems like a pretty convincing argument to stay invested to me.
Yeah, I agree also.
It also illustrates why trying to time the market is a fool's errand. Can you predict when those 10 best days are going to happen?
And outside of the insider training, which is illegal and you should never do, you can't predict anything.
All right, so we're not panic selling. We're holding on to our stocks. We're staying invested. We're riding it out. What else should we do?
Well, I would stay away from financial news for a while. Don't glue yourself to the TV, looking at the graphs and stock tickers. You need to take a deep breath, go for a walk, do something fun, get your mind off of it.
Yeah, that sounds like reasonable advice to me. Okay, so what comes next?
Well, you can try doing a gut check to see whether or not your plan is still on track.
Yeah, maybe this should be obvious, but how do you do that?
Well, people usually use the 4% rule for retirement accounts, right?
Maybe we should define the 4% rule real quick for viewers who might not be familiar with it.
Good point. The 4% rule is the idea that if you withdraw 4% from your retirement plan each year, you won't run out of money. Now, there is a school of thought that some folks should ditch the 4% rule, but perhaps that is a conversation for another day.
Good idea. So you were about to tell our viewers what to do with the 4% rule in mind.
Right. So say your account has lost 10% of its value during a market slide. If you take out 4% of its current value, can you live on that over the course of a year? Now, if not, your plan may be off track and you may want to talk to your financial services professional. Now, odds are they won't tell you to pull your money out of the market, but can suggest some ways to recalibrate or rebalance your portfolio to help you stay on track.
What about cash savings?
That's a really good point, Ryan, because if you're near retirement and you have 12 months worth of expenses saved in your cash savings account, you're in a better position. It means you don't have to sell equities at a loss and hurt the nest egg you plan to live on later.
Downturns usually end after a year or so, right? So the 12-month cash savings should help you ride it out?
Well, that's pretty well true.
So Sue, what if you have more than 12 months worth of expenses saved up?
Well, that's really a good point.
All right, so say I don't have 12 months or I want more than 12 months worth of cash in my savings. How do I boost it?
Well, some ways to bolster your cash savings include taking the option to get stock dividends and interest payments in cash instead of reinvesting them. Now, another option is a reverse mortgage. But in my opinion, you should proceed with extreme caution before doing that.
I agree. There's a risk of foreclosure with reverse mortgages. I don't think that's a good way to kick off retirement, but it could be a good option in some cases. So talking to a financial services professional first might make sense.
That's exactly right.
What are some other ways to boost cash savings?
Well, you can try selling some bonds or fixed income assets.
Sue, what about stocks?
Well, in my opinion, you should leave them as long as you can and give them time to recover, because stocks should be the last thing you want to liquidate for retirement savings.
It makes sense to me. What else should folks do if they're concerned about a market downturn leading up to their golden years?
Well, think about cutting expenses. Now, I know that can be a bummer for some folks, as retirement is often a time for people to do all the things they wanted to do but never had time for. But your nest egg may have to last for 2 decades or more, and you may have to put your future well-being over things like travel, dining out, and so on.
So if you're planning to live on $100,000 but can get by with $80,000, then you can avoid selling your investments and give them time to recover.
That's right, and you might have to adjust your lifestyle expectations, because most people plan to do their traveling and living it up within the first few years of retirement.
All right, so we've got a few minutes left in this segment. Market downturns are a bit of a bummer of a subject. Let's talk about something a little bit more fun.
Like what?
I came across another Investopedia article about the going rate for kids' teeth.
What?
The tooth fairy.
Oh, okay.
Investopedia reports that kids are getting as much as $5 per tooth these days.
Wow, that's a nice chunk of change. How did you come by that number?
The article reports that Delta Dental runs a yearly poll, and it found that the average tooth fairy payment is $5. That's lower than the previous year when it was $6.
Wow. Sounds like not even the tooth fairy is immune to the effects of increases in the cost of living.
That's right. Still, the payments are up significantly from past years. Way back in 1998, the average tooth fairy deposit was $1.30. That's a 300% increase.
Well, how much did you get when you were a kid?
I think I was lucky if I got a quarter.
Yeah, me too. How about allowances? How much are kids getting these days for allowance?
Sure. The same article reported that as of 2022, kids are getting an average of $19 per week.
Wow, that's more than I ever got.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of kids picking up pine cones or sticks for a penny apiece?
No, but you'd have to pick up a lot to earn $19.
You sure would, Sue. I think we're out of time for this segment. Viewers, if you have questions about what to do about your retirement plan, if you're close to retirement during a market downturn, contact us at retirewithbuska.com or call 715-355-4445. We'll be right back with more of Financially Speaking after this.
If you're 59 and a half or have recently changed jobs, now might be the perfect time to consider a 401k rollover. Rolling over your old 401ks could simplify your finances and give you more control from investment options and costs to how and when you make withdrawals. A rollover could give you the opportunity to partner with a financial services professional and tailor your investments to your specific needs, not the company's group plan. Call our office today to schedule your complimentary consultation and see if a 401k rollover is right for you.
With recent market changes, it's understandable that some people are feeling a little anxious about their financial future. That's why now might be a perfect time to review your financial plan. A financial services professional is trained to help you stay focused on the facts, not emotions, when it comes to your strategy. Getting a second opinion today works to ensure your investments are properly positioned to weather market volatility and that you're not taking on more risk than you realize. Let's work to make sure your plan is ready for whatever comes next. Call us today to schedule a complimentary review with one of our financial professionals.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's edition of Financially Speaking. We're glad you were able to join us today, and we hope you learned some useful retirement tips along the way.
On today's show, we covered a number of important topics, and hopefully we did so in a manner that was easy for you to understand. This is the same way we communicate to our clients when we meet with them in person. Remember, with the help of the right financial services professional, you can create a quality retirement, and our team is here to help. Right now may be a great time to get a second opinion on your retirement plan. Call us at 715-355-4445 or go to retirewithbuska.com to continue retirement education, catch up on previous episodes of our TV or radio show, or schedule your complimentary, no obligation consultation.
If you have any questions or comments about today's show, call us at 715-355-4445 or feel free to send us an email at info@retirewithbuska.com. Join us next week at the same time and the same place for another episode of Financially Speaking.